again, not dissimilar to now. Like when we had the pandemic, where did everyone start shopping at? Online. Amazon went through the roof. Walmart. All these big corporations. Your mom and pops got destroyed. And maybe there's some behind the scenes workings there as well, because now these multinational corporations, they could say McDonald's, they could say Nike, and those sound American. They're not American, right? These are very much world corps now.
Now that you're on that topic, I got to say one thing. Not only did mom and pops fail, decently large corporations failed as well. There's a conspiracy on the fact that Amazon, it's funny, Amazon executives have been known to leave Amazon and then go run another company that ultimately was a competitor of Amazon. And somehow these companies are then going bankrupt or closing shop or selling out to Amazon.
Yep.
And it's weird how it's happened multiple times.
It seems like Toys R Us and what that Bed Bath, was it Bed Bath Beyond?
One of the home sense types. Yeah, one of those companies did it as well. And so you're seeing the Amazon network like going out into the world and then nuking these companies or bringing them in-house.
Exactly. These companies think they're being smart because they kind of poach these executives from Amazon. And they say, like, listen, we want you to move us online the same way that Amazon is online. And then all of a sudden those companies go to business. There is this whole behind the scenes working, like is Amazon going out there and poison pilling all of their big rivals. But part of this, how they were allowed to do this and how these corporations were able to grow to this extent is because there was this push towards efficiencies and big corporations. And then from that, multinational corps or transnational corps that were allowed to exist outside, like they may be quote unquote American, but they're not actually American or they're not actually Canadian. They exist in cheaper markets around the world. So by the 1970s, it was something like 1/3 of capital assets in the U.S. were actually owned, or 1/3 of capital assets owned by U.S. companies were actually outside of the U.S. So they started to expand, and in exchange, trade now, we're promoting cheaper trade and opening our trade doors to countries like China who are just like, yeah, we can do it cheaper because we don't pay our people as much. We don't have these stringent standards, and that started our societal indebtedness to big corporations, many of which that have ties to China.
Give me a conspiracy.
What's that?
Give me a conspiracy.
So
everyone knows the history now. They know the background.
Yeah.
They're educated.
So I think that, when you see, some of these big national companies got into or exist in the banking world. And we saw the next big ride-up of cheap money was in the early 2000s, and there was the housing boom, and then the housing market collapsed in 2007, and there's all kinds of corruption there that isn't even really conspiracy theory. It's just like fact. Like these were bad mortgages, high risk. The money was cheap. The market was going up. So these companies were lending these, and then these mortgages were being sold, and then these mortgage-backed securities were being sold, and it was a literal pyramid scheme that all collapsed. And then there was a big recession between 2007 and 2010 where the average person got noticeably poorer and statistically numbers-wise poorer, but the actual richest 1% continued to get larger and larger. So then you had the Occupy movement in 2011, which everyone may remember, may not. That's a long time ago for you, Neal. You were only 15 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Okay.
I wasn't part of this movement.
A bunch of hippies. No, I'm just kidding. The big Occupy movement was a group of people that went down to Wall Street, and they didn't have a clear-cut agenda, which was part of their downfall. But effectively, they were saying, we are the 99%. We are the average person. We are far the majority, and we have a small share of money, and it's because of all this corruption. It's because of Wall Street. It's because of big business and corporations and all that. And they kind of started this movement that spread around the world. And eventually disbanded. It was broken down and it ended. And the question is, well, what actually came out of it? Because all those companies got bailouts anyway, and you can make some ties to maybe like an increased left presence in politics, whether it's Bernie Sanders or anything like that. However, I think there's something more sinister that went on, because this is also the same time as the Arab Spring was going on Facebook. And I think these big corporations took two things out of that sort of changed the world. One, they realized the power of social media to organize people.
Yeah.
And that if a disorganized entity that literally in their own mandate was like, we don't have a hierarchy, there's no leader of the Occupy movement, this is just free-flowing, blah, blah, blah. If they could mobilize this many people to cause this much unrest, imagine what you could do with social media if you had an agenda. Same thing with the Arab Spring. Like that showed big corporations and lobby groups, which reminder, corporations can lobby and do whatever they want now. They realize the power of social media, and then you have things like election tampering, different narratives that are maybe not true, conspiracy theories, etc. The other thing they realize is like, oh my gosh, these people didn't move the decimal far enough. It's not 99 and 1%. It's 99.9 and 0.1%, if we're being realistic.
Yeah.
And what was realized within that is like, oh my gosh, there's a chance to scapegoat the 1%, because the actual 0.1% exists on another plane. Like, it is another universe that we don't even really know how they're existing. And you get these figureheads like Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, which I think are also kind of plants, because they're these rock star, oddly popular figureheads, but they're the actual corporations that are out there. No one really hears or thinks about them. I don't know that they're plants
by the government.
I think the true 0.1% corporate world.
Who's the evil one? Bezos? He's the evil one. Bezos is evil. Elon's
I think
cool.
they're just there to be like, oh, this is the 0.1%. It's that guy, right? Give people something to point to. It's like, oh yeah, it's the guy that owns Amazon, or the guy that owns Tesla, or the guy that owns Facebook. They're the 0.1%. It's like, no, like the corporations that are doing the most sinister things around the world, they're not going to have a Jeff Bezos out there banging his drum. Like, they're not going to be shooting each other into space. They're, they move. Real G's move in silence, like lasagna, as Lil Wayne once said. These guys are moving on the stealth, and they're happy that you're over there staring at this stuff, which is also why they're happy you're distracted by the Kardashians, and they also own the media, so this sensory overload keeps people away from talking about these more sinister, dark things that are going on. So my conspiracy theory is that they saw this little social unrest, and they realized it was a great opportunity to do a few things. One, mobilize on social media and kind of corrupt that space. Two, they realized that the average person already unconsciously realized they couldn't touch the 0.1%. So what they targeted was the 1%. Like, the person working on Wall Street does make a lot of money, and that does make you angry, but they are not ruining your life, right? The people, the puppet masters that control all of Wall Street and that whole level of the economy, they're controlling some of these things, lobbying government, keeping pharmaceutical prices high, all that sort of stuff. But it's not the guy in your grade 12 class that you graduated with who now works for a hedge fund. It's not that dude, right? It's not the corporation that owns, 5 franchises in your neighborhood. But what they've managed to do is to convince you that those people are the problem, that those people aren't paying enough taxes. And so governments run on platforms that address, the richest 6 people you went to high school with, but does nothing to address the actual richest corporations in the world.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.